show you how to make chocolate leaves, and we're going to be using holly leaves and leaves from the bay tree. I'm also going to show you how to make marzipan leaves, which use a mould essentially. So first of all, what we need to do is to melt our chocolate, and the chocolate I'm using is dark chocolate. I've actually got pallets, as they're called, or callets rather, which is what kind of chefs use, catering suppliers have. But you can buy a bar of dark chocolate. You really need at least 70% cocoa solids, and with that you'll need to chop it into small chunks to get it to melt fairly quickly. We're going to be tempering that chocolate, which means it'll be glossy and will have a good snap. It makes it strong, therefore when we peel it off the leaf, that's how we're going to do it, using natural leaves. The leaf will be peeled off the chocolate, and so as I say, you'll end up with a strong leaf that you can then use to decorate cakes or however you want to use them. So, being outdoors as we are, I have got some very hot water in this old flagon, which was actually made in Chester, my home city, and I'm going to put that in a bowl, on top of which I will sit about 2/3 of the amount of chocolate that I'm going to use, and I want it to melt. Once it's melted, I'm then going to what's called seed it by putting more of the chocolate into it and mixing it around, which means that then the chocolate will be in temper, as it's called. It maintains its temper, which makes it gives it that shine and makes it gives it the snap, makes it strong. So first of all, the water. Nice water bath. Now you don't want to get water in with your chocolate, so be a little bit careful about that. I'm then going to take out a fair bit of this chocolate. I've got quite a lot here, perhaps more than I need. Well, almost certainly more than I need.
Can you tell us what sort of chocolate you're using?
This is dark chocolate, as I say, about 70% solids. So I'm going to just leave it in there. So now the chocolate has melted. You see it's nice and smooth. It wants to be about 45 degrees, but it's not absolutely critical, as long as it's melted. And then we want to what's called seed that with the still tempered chocolate here. As I say, I'm using callets. You might like to chop barred chocolate, and the smaller the better, really, because it melts more quickly, and so that keeps it nice and melted for dipping your leaves. Now, just while that, we're going to take that off the water. I'll put the water out of the way. Shouldn't be needing that anymore. I'm going to put a little bit more of the seeding chocolate in. Essentially, it's all about the crystal structure of the fats and the sugars, the crystals have to be of a certain sort. You need to kind of certain ones need to be predominant in order to get the gloss and the snap. So we're just going to let that just melt a little bit, and then I'm going to take a couple of get some nice leaves off the bay tree that haven't been nibbled by anything or harbouring any weevils. I think these have a good shape, and what you want is a fairly strong leaf. The bay leaf, like the holly leaf, is a good strong leaf that won't just tear into pieces when you're trying to peel it off the chocolate. So I'm going to just wipe those. We want them nice and dry, but obviously just make sure they're nice and clean as well. So we'll do 4 of each. You can obviously do as many as you like. Looking good, that's pretty well melted. Okay, so obviously chocolate can be a very messy business, so we're going to try and keep this as tidy as we can because I want to use the board for the marzipan as well. So I've laid out a sheet of baking parchment here just to make sure that we don't get too messy. I'm just coating. What you want to do is coat the back of the leaf because that's where the ridges are, the veins, and they will then show up as the front of your chocolate leaf. So I'm just dipping that like that, and I am going to lay them on something suitable. Perhaps I'm going to put it on there for it then to set. So let's do a couple more.
Show the back of the leaf. This leaf.
Oh yes. Well, that's a messy one. Okay, so you can see the veins on the back of the leaf, which will then make an imprint on the front to look like that. So try and keep your fingers clean if you can. Keep stirring. Doesn't matter if it's a bit chunky on the back, because it gives it more strength that way. It's less likely to break. Let's do one more and then we'll do the holly leaves. So this is a really nice thing to do for Christmas. So if you can find some good holly leaves that aren't perhaps too crinkly and too spiny, because you don't want to lacerate yourself while you're doing this. But this one, because it's quite curvaceous, I'm going to smear it on with a spoon, as you can see. And marzipan is very straightforward. There's one thing that you need to be aware of, which is when you're mixing it, is not to overwork it, because we use ground almonds. We've got some here, and we're going to use golden caster sugar. Golden caster sugar is good. It has extra flavour over and above white caster sugar, but you can use either. The ground almonds, when they're worked too much, the oil comes out and the marzipan becomes really oily and greasy, and there's not a lot you can do about it once that's happened. We'll have some egg white in there to bind it together, and I'm going to add a touch of Cointreau as well. That is good for flavour, obviously, but also it helps to stop the almonds from oiling, as we call it. So it's very easy. In a sense, you don't really need to measure the quantities too accurately. So I'm just going to use 4 dessert spoonfuls of the ground almonds, 4 of golden caster sugar, and then as much egg white as we need to bind it together. So we'll judge it as we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
So
1, 2, this is the caster sugar. 3, 4. I'm going to put just a tiny pinch of salt. I think maybe I'm a bit eccentric in this, but I think it really improves the flavour. Sugar and salt do go rather well together. So just mix those around, and then I'm going to put about 2 teaspoons of Cointreau in there. Give it a little alcoholic kick. You could always use orange flower water is good, rose water is good, just a little flavouring, and as I say, it helps with the whole oiling situation. In very old recipes, you often see them saying add water when they're actually pounding the almonds, when you couldn't get ground almonds, and had to do that in a pestle and mortar. So I've got a couple of egg whites in here. I won't need all of this, but I'm just going to whisk them a little bit, just to break them up till they become quite watery, before adding carefully. What we don't want is to add too much so the mixture becomes sloppy. It needs to have that firm paste texture, especially since we want then to be able to mould the leaves out of it. Normally, of course, you could leave it a little bit to kind of settle, pop it in the fridge wrapped in cling film overnight, and that is quite good for the whole thing just blending and settling. But we can't do that at the moment because we need to get on with it. So I'm going to mix that around. So I'm going to add just a little of the egg white and see how we get on. It can look as if there isn't enough liquid in there until you really mix it. But I'm doing this gently. I'm trying not to squish the actual ground almonds too much, for the reasons I've mentioned. Let's give it a tiny bit more. It's a bit dry just at the moment. Ooh, that's quite a lot. Let's see how we get on with that. Try not to spill it everywhere. That's looking to me as if it's coming together quite nicely now. Once you feel that it's coming together, where's my knife? Somewhere here. Where do things go? There. There. Then you might actually want to get your hand in there and just bring it together like that. That's definitely got plenty of liquid in there. If you find that it's too sloppy, you can always add a little more of the ground almonds. So it's quite forgiving as long as you don't overwork it. Yeah, that feels as if it's coming together quite nicely. It just wants the very lightest amount of kneading, so you do get some structure there. Good. Now it does feel as if it would really like to rest for a bit, but we can't do that. Okay, so we need icing sugar. So I am going to use a fairly fine sieve and just sieve a little bit of it onto the paper like that. To stop it sticking. And we'll see how we get on. If we still have a problem, I've got some corn flour to hand, which is pretty fail-safe for powdering a baking board, your rolling pin, baking sheet like this, if the icing sugar on its own is not sufficient. Okay, so let's just kind of move that around a bit, get it coated, and then we'll have a go at rolling it out. I feel I'm slightly cheating, but I've got some little push-out moulds. I think my mother had years ago, which you can use with fondant icing, or in this case with marzipan. So we just push it down like that. It stamps out the shape, and then we pop it out like that and hope it hasn't entirely stuck. Okay, well, it's not bad for a first go. We can probably tidy that one up. If not, we'll I think I'm going to go a bit thinner, but we can re-roll it if it hasn't quite worked and have another go. Let's say with a bit more working, it might become easier anyway, as the texture will improve. What appears as patchy icing sugar at this stage will just essentially dissolve into the general mix, so you won't see it later. Oh, that's quite a success. I'm quite pleased with that one. So that's the sort of thing you can do. Now, ideally, as I mentioned before, really want to leave these things overnight to dry out a little bit. We all know from Christmas cake experience that marzipan firms up quite considerably and dries out to a firmer texture. There we are. I mean, the benefit of making your own marzipan is that the flavour is so much better than the commercial stuff. Although, you know, if you haven't got the time, then you can use that, obviously. So we're going to put those to one side and return to our chocolate leaves, hoping that they've set sufficiently for me to be able to show you the effect that we're going for. Then we're going to put some colour on these marzipan leaves. So, okay, just like that. You can go there.
Can we pause?
So now we're going to give it a go with peeling the leaf off the chocolate and hope that they separate nicely without cracking. They seem to have set pretty well. It's nice and crispy. The chocolate is definitely tempered. Yes, success. So there is one. That's our bay leaf. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think the holly leaves might be trickier, so we'll have to exercise great caution in removing them. Rose leaves normally are very good for this, but obviously it's not really the time of year. Most of them have got black spot and so on by now. And beech leaves are good as well, because they're quite tough. Come on, come on, come on, you can do it. Obviously, cool hands for doing this is a good idea. Mine certainly are pretty cool at the moment out here. Yes, I think that's a success. You might trim it up a little bit with a sharp knife, where the chocolate's just run over the edge a little bit. So, with the chocolate leaves, I feel I'd rather like to put a little bit of gold on them. I'm feeling Christmassy. So I've got some edible gold powder. This is, again, a lustre powder. You'll certainly find it online, or if you have a local specialist cake supply shop, you'll find it there. I'm using a pretty small paintbrush for this. A decent set of paintbrushes is such a help. And I think you can see you're getting a really nice lustre with that. Not an absolutely full covering. Let some of the brown come through, I think is really attractive. And particularly if you're going to be serving this in candlelight, it would be absolutely lovely where it just catches the light in some areas. You can experiment. This is the fun of this sort of thing. Let your artistic side come through. You can also get silver powder and various bronze powders and so on, and they're just brilliant. As I say, a fairly recent discovery for me has been lustre powder, and I just think it's wonderful stuff. So there we have a little collection. I'm going to just give a touch of gold to these as well, since we're feeling festive. So you're kind of building up the colour. It doesn't taste of anything, and it's perfectly, you know, come through. You can also get silver powder and various bronze powders and so on, and they're just brilliant. As I say, a fairly recent discovery for me has been lustre powder, and I just think it's wonderful stuff. So there we have a little collection. I'm going to just give a touch of gold to these as well, since we're feeling festive. So you're kind of building up the colour. It doesn't taste of anything, and it's perfectly, you know, fine for eating. So we're just going to have a look at the marzipan leaves again. They haven't had the time to dry that we would like, but we can work with them. So I'm going to give them a little bit of colour. They're a bit pasty, as you might say, at the moment. So I find that powder colour is really good, and normally doesn't require diluting if you're very careful, you can often just brush the powder on. We'll see how it goes. First thing I'm going to do though, if you can see, is the holly leaves, the markings are not terrifically clear on these, so I'm going to give it a bit more work just to create a bit more definition. Not too deeply, but just so you can see where the veins might be. I think that's got a better look. Maybe the central vein needs a little bit more still. There we are. Just a couple of them. So you get the idea. And as I say, you can always tidy up the edges a little bit once they've set a bit more. But it gives the general impression. Let's give that a little bit more definition as well. I like using old dining knives like this there. I feel comfortable with those. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do is get a nice little paintbrush. You want quite a soft brush, that's good, an artist's brush. And I'm going to go for a fairly deep green powder here. But I think it might be called forest green or leaf green or something along those lines. And we're going to see how it works with just the powder.
Where do you get that from?
You can get this from specialist suppliers, obviously online, but under normal conditions, shops that sell supplies for making wedding cakes and such like.
Show it.
So I've just got a little bit in a pot there. So I'm going to brush the leaf with that very gently, trying to get a fairly even coating. As we know, in life, leaves are not generally perfect, so it doesn't have to be the most beautiful thing. You need to experiment. So I've got a simple Madeira cake that we're going to decorate. So again, very simply, I'm just going to put some icing sugar on it, dust it with that, make it look a bit snowy. There we are. Then I'm going to decorate it with the leaves that we have made. So I'm thinking now, I think I want, actually quite a lot of these, we may not use them all. I think we'll have the holly and the ivy in the centre, like that. I'm going to transfer this onto our serving plate and then put the chocolate leaves around it, I think. Just like that. So I might need to dust some more leaves. So a kind of scattering of the chocolate leaves. So let's do a little bit more gilding on here. Slightly roughly and quickly, but anyway. There we are. The effect will be good, I think. So you can spend time arranging all this to make it look very beautiful. Maybe we'll have a little more gold on that. I think something along those lines. Don't know how it looks from that side. That's it. Oh, we've got another marzipan. Shall we? There we are. 2 holly leaves there. Holly and the ivy. So there we are. Simply done. Some chocolate. It's very tasty. We've got some marzipan and a quick display. So I hope you find that useful.